called Rama. It's a place that we all know so well. It was there that we gave of our manhood, and so many of our brave comrades fell. We are proud of a British battalion and the stand for Madrid that they made. And they fought like two sons of the soil as part of the 15th Brigade. How does the next bit go, Duncan? Can you remember it? Sorry.
We've left. Now we've left that valley forever.
Now we've left that valley of sorrow,
But its memories
will
we never
never
shall forget.
remain. And oh God.
I'll bring the words the next time.
She used to sing it.
See, we lived up the next close to Eddie in Kinter Street. Do you ever read? You know what I mean? That's all about knowing.
Climb over and we'll put you into bed.
Right, you done all your washing in that, then you threw them in there to rinse them, right? You had this bath, you threw them onto that bath, you had to carry the bath out, it's big spinners, big round spinners, you know.
It was a May Day in 1979, myself and another shop steward were clearing out the loft in the Union Hall, Govan Road, and I found these banners. And there were two banners, this banner behind me and another one. The other banner is the 1820 movement. We tried to stand, the people stood up for Scotland and somebody put to the rope. We tried to find out who the people were responsible for making these banners. We could only go with the writing on it. It was a Scottish Socialist Govan branch. But there was no one in the Govan could give us any information, so we put information in a local paper. No response, we did it twice, still no response. That is why it's called the mystery of the banners.
Donde sobra corazón, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Donde sobra corazón, ay Carmela, ay Carmela.
My name is John Jack Sweeney, and for the past 40 years, I have been involved in local politics and trade union activities in Govan. The last time I was in here was 1981. So here we go. In the 1970s, I was shop convener for Govan Shafting Works and branch chairman for the Amalgamated Engineering Union, which held its meetings in this hall. Come in, come in. So to me, it's a blast of the past coming in here and just seeing this. Well, last time I was in here was 1980, when the unions were still running it, the 5 branches were running it. Well, I was the chairman of the branch, and I had to give you information about what was happening. You know, there's going to be strikes here, or someone was going to be elected. An election, I should stand here and shout. You know, the branch recommendation is Mr. Brown from the Yards. Branch recommendation is Mr. Brown from the Yards. Then we count the votes and then they voted for the guy, you know. Democracy, that's democracy, brothers, you know. That was the times when the member paid his dues himself, his weekly dues or his monthly dues himself, and then it became, took it off your wages. That was the end of the branches. So the branches, we've seen it disappearing. You couldn't have your debates, you couldn't debate anymore, you know. So that fell by the wayside. Then the union sold the hall, because that was it. And what had happened, myself and Tom McIntyre, they're shop stewards, we decided to clear the loft. It was a May Day, the first Monday in May, 79. So what I'd done is I climbed up the loft, up here. Right along the loft, we started showing, you know, bric-a-brac, old chairs, old union books, etc., sort of stuff. And we got to the end of the loft, then we discovered the banners. And the banners were wrapped in newspapers, 1941. We brought them down, we put them up that wall over there. People's Palaces they say we know they've got one banner, but the other banner, we're still looking for it. It was from the Govan Socialist Party. So we're going to try and find out what this other one is. Maybe we could borrow it.
I'm R.W. Marshall, but if you're a Govanite, you could call me Rolly. And I'm a true blue Govanite. I was duked in the pond, and I was Govan's working boy, because every holiday I ever went on, there was work entailed in it. Govan's important to me because I was born in Govan, and the time I lived in Govan, it was a great community, and I mean community. And we all helped each other. If the mothers went out to get messages and they left out their washing and it rained, some other men went out and collected the washing and brought it back in.
I was born in Govan. I was raised in Govan till I was 6 years of age, and then we were evacuated during World War II. Right. I love going out and about and speaking to other people. And I love the part that we've all got something to say, even within the group, out with the group. And it's good to hear other people's opinions, whether it's social history, whether it's today or whatever. That's what I love about it.
Hi, my name's James McGee. I was born in 1937 in the 18 Greenfield Street. I went to Fairfield School. Leaving Fairfield School was a baker to trade. I went into liquidation. I went from there into Southern General. I was in there for 40 years. and now I'm retired. I joined the Reminiscing group, and they also told me about the portal, which I came along, learning how to do photography, cameras, developing various things.
Thank you very much. Right number. The number has been changed. Cut.
I'm Kirsten MacLeod. I'm the filmmaker with Remember When. We've been making a film about the Govan Banners, about banners that were found in Govan, about the Spanish Civil War and about the 1820 uprising. We've been trying to find out why they were made, who made them, and when they were used, and as well something about the stories that are told in the banners themselves.
My name is John Sweeney. I'm from the Plantation Productions in Govan, and I'm looking for the whereabouts of banners that were put into a museum in the early 80s. One of your banners is in your top floor, the Spanish Revolution. The other banners, which is very important, is the Scottish Socialist Party Govan branch, and it was put in storage some time ago. I'm inquiring here if it's possible we could see that banner, or maybe even borrow it to bring it back to Govan to make a film. They're moving their stores at the moment, and it's quite possible this banner could be in the borough collection. But as a gentleman I've got to contact, Mark O'Neill, got to write to this gentleman, and he will give us some information. But even at that, if we got information where the banner was, it would take up to 7 to 8 months for to get a loan of it. Our quest had begun. We wanted to find the other Govan banner and to find out who had made them, how they were used and why. We invited John McLean, the editor of a local paper, to hear our story.
One of him in his younger days, carrying another banner.
It's a fine jacket and shirt.
Who actually made them? Who actually?
You'd have thought it'd been a May Day parade or something, you know.
There's film archive that we've come across that definitely has marches and banners.
How do you carry them? I mean, they're that high as well. You know, if you put them on poles, how many men do you need to carry these things? So we were of the opinion that they're possibly in halls for display for rallies. Because there's no way could I see these banners that size being carried. Because there's nothing on them. You know, there's no connections.
There's no things down the sides.
Nothing, no poles or no connections.
My name is Tony Donoghue, and I used to stay in Govan many years ago. I had the privilege of being in Govan jail as a prisoner, a political prisoner, for 12 hours. I tried to escape from the jail, but it wasn't possible. But others did escape. Anyway, I've always had interest in Govan's social history, so that's why I joined the group.
My name is Lily Love. I was born in Govan and have always lived in the neighbourhood. I haven't always been a member of the Remembrance Group, but I got involved when Jack Sweeney called me due to the Banners having the 1820 connection, of which I'm the Secretary of the 1820 Society.
My name's Stephen Bradley. I work with Plantation Productions and I've been helping out with Remember When since it started. It was about a year ago. We have great fun going out and just learning about things, different things.
Our next stop was Glasgow's Mitchell Library. We needed to get some information about the events portrayed on the banners themselves, the Spanish Civil War and the 1820 Scottish Uprising. The conflict known as the Spanish Civil War was fought between 1936 and 1939, a bloody and bitter war. It began when a democratically elected government was challenged by a coup led by the fascist military leader, General Franco. Those on the fascist side fought government troops who were supported of communists, trade unionists and working people. These Republicans had some support from the Soviet Union. The fascists had the considerable support of the German and Italian military with tanks, planes, troops and munitions.
Viva la Quinta Brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Viva la Quinta Brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Que nos cubrirá de glorias, ay Carmen.
In the north of Spain, regional support for the Republicans was crushed by heavy military bombardment, the murder of innocent people and the flattening of towns like Guernica. People were made refugees, fleeing their homes, many never to return. Though clearly a warm-up to what became the Second World War, Western governments held back from intervention. However, some of their citizens did not. They volunteered for the international brigades and campaigned to support the Spanish Republic fight fascism. In a research at the Mitchell Library archives, Jim found documents relating to the 1820 uprising in Scotland. These were letters between the Lords Provost of Glasgow and Paisley describing growing discontent. In 1820, weavers in the Glasgow and Paisley areas were agitating for political reform, for the right to vote. An uprising was crushed by the government forces in Bonnymuir and Stirlingshire, and its ringleaders, Baird, Hardy and Wilson, were captured, tried and hung for treason. Others were sent to Australia. Today, the memory of the 1820 uprising is kept alive by the likes of the 1820 Society, who commemorate the Battle of Bonnymuir on the 5th of April. The Govan Banners uniquely link the 1820 uprising in Scotland with the fight for democracy during the Spanish Civil War.
Better to die on your feet than live forever on your knees. Spoken by Dolores Ibarauru, La Passionaria.
The city of Glasgow and the British Labour movement pay tribute to the courage of these men and women who went to Spain to fight fascism. 1936 to 1939. 2,100 volunteers went from Britain. 534 were killed. 65 of them came from Glasgow. And I don't know just how many, but it was about a handful came from Govan.
Daniel Gray has written about the Scottish contribution to the Spanish Civil War in his book, Homage to Caledonia.
And how many were from Glasgow?
From Britain, 2,500 went across to fight in Spain. 549, or a few more perhaps, went from Scotland. Half of them, around half, were from Glasgow. Glasgow was the real epicentre of this. Volunteers from the rest of the country were channelled through Glasgow, the Communist Party HQ on Ingram Street. So this was really the city that was at the fulcrum. Of all the Scots that went, around 140 died there, making it a death rate twice that of the First World War.
My name's Cathy Brown. I live in Paisley, although I was born in Glasgow and lived for years in Johnson. But I'm very, very interested, have been for years, in working class history. And when I was told that this was taking place here, I decided to come along. Some of them were comrades from Govan, who I knew, but as I say, they're all dead now. But that doesn't mean to say that we don't still remember them and do what we can to let other people know exactly what they did.
Charlie Goodfellow. A miner from Bells Hill, held in high regard for his coolness under fire. Second Command British Battalion. International Brigade, Spain.
Killed in action, July 1937.
In particular areas of Glasgow, like Govan, like Baillieston, like Shettleston, real working class areas, this was the cause of the day. In Spain, they found many of their other causes embodied. This was the final fight in many ways. This is what everything had been leading up to. This is what the hunger marches had led up to. This is what domestic anti-fascism had led up to. Spain was pretty much the pinnacle.
We invited Professor Willie Maley to speak to the group. His father, Jimmy Maley, from Glasgow's East End, fought in Spain with the International Brigades, was captured in Jarama and imprisoned for 4 months.
It was in 1936. Basically, he went as a Communist Party member and as a Communist Party speaker. He was a platform speaker. He used to speak at Glasgow Green and at Govan Cross. He carried his platform back and forth under his arm. And so 1936, December 36, he went to Spain, as I say, because the Communist Party was sending people there.
I recognised right from wrong. This was the first time an attempt made by working class people to take power. And they're being attacked. And I was a member of the Communist Party. And I volunteered along the rest to go to Spain. And we left in December 1936. From George Square, 3 double-decker bus, packed to the brim, some standing, to London. We got off at London, and we had a night there at the pictures, and it was off to France.
What kind of combat situations was he in, and what was his company, and what was hardest for him?
He was in No. 2 Machine Gun Company. It was a Maxim machine gun, I can't remember the exact name. Maxim machine gun, 28 in the company. His story is they arrived, they did 6 weeks training, part of which was spent waiting for rifles to arrive, for equipment to arrive. But 6 weeks training at Albacete, then straight into battle at Jarama.
And we're in the war, and I was some in the war. We saw them dying before our eyes. They were retreating all the time. And all of a sudden, we were left, and over on that right-hand side, there was the flank of Belgians, and they were being retreating too. And we just emptied the machine guns, until there were no bullets left, nothing left, and they were all away behind us. And no more do we hear the sounds of the war or nothing, but that was us left there. We couldn't go back, couldn't go anywhere.
And I think they were taken first to a little place called Talavera de la Reina, which is 20 miles from Madrid. Then they were taken to Salamanca, where they were fingerprinted, shaved, head shaved, and sentenced to 20 years, of which they did 4 or 5 months, something like that, before being exchanged for Italian prisoners.
My uncle David, he was one of the 5 young men from Govan who were actually killed during the Trouble. David Smith and I think the boy Shields, they were fairly young, in their 20s, and listening to their older brothers talking about how if they weren't married, if they didn't have a family, they would be out there fighting with the International Brigade. And of course the younger men were fired up with this and joined up. I know my father and probably the man Shields went up to try and get the boys back, but because they were over 21 and possibly even over 25, naturally they had signed up and they went. Unfortunately, David and I think the boy Shields were both killed at Harama.
This article here from the Herald, it says here, it's regarding Jimmy Melley. This is after he's passed away. It says, Melley was an avid fan of Glasgow Celtic, and 2 30-feet long banners were unfurled in his honour at Hampden Park on Saturday during the cup tie against St Johnstone, quoting the slogan used by the defenders of Madrid during the Spanish Civil War, "They shall not pass." The banners said, James Melley, R.I.P., no passaran.
When you speak about banners, the International Brigade banner, my father took charge of that at different times when they had the various meetings. So my father was quite, was quite proprietorial about, the banner. They had the banner up for his coffin and so on for the funeral.
There was also a banner my father used to take me to see up in the People's Palace, which mentioned the 5 young men from Govan who died.
Obviously, many more volunteers from Govan.
Just 5 died.
Because I worked beside Jimmy McKeefery, who came from King Street in Govan. McKeefery was a very, very quiet man, and I worked with him. And of course, he spoke very little about the Spanish Civil War, but that was the only man I knew personally. But the memory of the brigade was very strong in Govan.
Yeah, indeed. That's David, David Smith, who died, and
Was it Harama?
Do they ever meet?
Harama.
Harama.
That just says given to Andrew Smith for David Smith, who was in the 15th Brigade, the 16th Battalion, joined in January 37, killed at Harama. And at the back is presumably David sent a letter when he arrived, because he sent 5 pesetas and a Spanish stamp.
That's amazing.
That was on it. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is a poem that my father has kept in this book, and it says, we shall meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We shall linger to caress him while we breathe our evening prayer. And then at our fireside, sad and lonely, often will the bosom swell at remembrance of the story how our noble Willie fell.
Alan Craig has come to the Glasgow Trades Council office to see the plaque commemorating the men from Glasgow who died fighting in Spain. It includes his father, Alan Craig.
Well, actually it was my uncle Charlie that decided to go to Spain. He wanted to go to Spain. My father said to him at the time, well, I think you're a wee bit daft, he says, but I'll come along with you just to keep my eye on you. And that was the actual words that were used, you know. And they fought at Harama. And I think my father was killed with friendly fire. They were actually, they were in a front position. Apparently they were in a front line position, and they got overrun by the Moors. And as they were pulling back, they were going up this hill. It was called, I think it was Suicide Hill or something. And he was shot with friendly fire. Or so I'm told anyway. Whether he was or not is another matter.
Where now is he, that comrade, quick with laughter? Behind the sandbags he crawled with bleeding knees. Sweat, blood, the pounding distance. Still he fired. The claws of heat were fastened in his arm that scraped along the stone. A wallowing roar, fire-drenching billowed as he was borne away, dying. He sang the International. Where is Alan Craig of Maryhill? My name is Jim Kane. I was born in Queen Street in Govan, now known as Neptune Street. And in my time it was dubbed the Irish Channel because of the waves of Irish immigrants. And from an early age, we realised without it being pounded into us that conditions were tough in that part of Govan. And although as youngsters we sort of looked up to these lads who had gone to Spain. It was a tremendous adventure in those days. But to read again about the International Brigade, it's inspiring in a sense. I mean, these lads, and women, men and women, that was the beginning of the real opposition to international fascism and Nazism. And I think their memory has been neglected in recent years. And I'm glad to be associated with this group that's keeping that memory alive. And I hope in so doing I'd help to perpetuate the memory of these marvellous and outstanding men and women.
It's a mystery that spans 30 years and involves a war that ended 70 years ago. Now a local history group is asking for our readers to help solve it. It was back in 1979 that the Govan Press reported an amazing find by trade union activist Jack Sweeney. While clearing out an attic in the old AUEW halls in Govan Road, he discovered two massive banners. One dated 1938, exhorted local workers to support colleagues who were fighting against General Franco's nationalists during the Spanish Civil War. Another belonged to the Govan branch of the Scottish Socialist Party, paid tribute to the martyrs of the 1820 Chartist democracy movement. We've been to the People's Palace, where one banner's hanging, the Spanish banner, but the 1820 banner, we haven't seen that yet, so we're going to see that. And that should be very interesting because I haven't seen this banner for 30 years.
My name is Duncan Munro. I'm 84 years of age and I was born in Govan, as was my father and my mother. And they were born in Govan when it was an independent borough up until 1912. And I stayed in Govan, went to Fairfield School, then Govan High School, and served my apprenticeship in Govan in Thermotank in Ellen Street. I stay in Erskine now, but what they say is you can take the man out of Govan, but you can't take Govan out the man.
Our phone calls and letters have been successful in securing us access to the other banner. It was too fragile to be hung in Govan, but we were welcomed to the Conservation Department at the Borough Collection, where it was brought out of storage for us to see.
It is really exciting. Finds are, things as important as these banners are out there.
They were wrapped in newspaper, dated 1940.
Oh well. 1940 is actually the date when the Scottish Socialist Party actually was absorbed into the wider Labour Party and that sort of thing. So the Scottish Socialist Party really was only in existence from about 1933 up to about 1940. So that really ties in very well with the newspaper account thing.
Well, we've got the answer that we know that the Scottish Socialist Party had disbanded, and that's how the banner's been wrapped up and just put out the road. Now, that's one question that's answered. I'm going to ask you another question. What would you think these banners would be used for in your experience? Because there are no, as you can see, there's no a banner that you would carry down the street.
And a lot of these sort of big rallies, I mean, the banners were brought out and there were symbols of different groups' interests, what they wanted. And I think that goes very much for the sort of whole history of banners, particularly if you look back at all the various rallies, demonstrations that take place in somewhere like Glasgow Green, where groups of people would get together and they would carry their banners, really sort of identify who they are, what they were there for, and their own interests. I think for this banner here, it sort of very clearly marks out it's a Scottish Socialist Party Govan branch, and then to greet all workers. I mean, that sort of does sort of link in very much of going to be taken down to a rally. I mean, I think it's very interesting that the banners sort of do look back to the sort of the figures of Thomas Muir, Baird and Hardy, I think, and as you say, sort of, as figureheads, that this was part of a sort of continuing Labour history, sort of died for democracy and sort of keeping democracy alive. So again, it definitely does sort of support all the issues around the Spanish Civil War, issues that were being discussed by sort of the left in Britain at the time.
One thing, the trade union banners tend to be commissioned and made by professional banner makers. And what's interesting and intriguing about this and the Compatriot is that they're not made by professional banner makers. From the style of drawing and painting, the scale of it is obviously people who are used to depicting images. It's got that feel. It's not professional banner maker.
They've penciled or charcoal it, and then done the figures, and then painted the figures, so that there's enough room for everything.
Yeah.
That's
So
why they've charcoal.
people made it and they used it as they wanted to, rather than it being used in the traditional manner. With the trade union banner, there's a lot of information about the paints, how they were constructed. We just don't have that information on a banner like this. We have the banner and we have memories, but we don't have the written accounts of just what was done, what was used, how it was made, and why it was made. I mean, that's the really intriguing one.
That's a mystery.
Yep.
Can I ask, what do you think?
One of the group's members, Gloria Finlayson, had several connections with people involved with the Spanish Civil War.
I can tell you that my husband, Pat Devine, who was originally one of the first 3 communist councillors in Motherwell in 1922, in 1971 was invited to Moscow because of his health. I went with him, and when we got to the hotel entrance, he dropped his stick. He would have been 72 about the time. He dropped his stick and literally ran across the floor and embraced a little old woman standing at the end in black. And I picked up his stick and rushed across, wondering what had happened. It was Passinaria. I knew it was before he said, because of her eyes. She still had the same gleam and vitality that she'd had all through her life. Pat had known her at the time of the Spanish Civil War because, apart from being in politics all the time, he was with Isabel Brown in the Aid to Spain. It's about that time the Communist Party of Great Britain was not allowing other communists to go because we'd lost so many over there already. But he was Aid to Spain with Isabel Brown touring the country. Isabel was so good at collecting for Spain, she took my last penny for the bus and I walked home, and I didn't begrudge one bit of it.
She campaigned with all the Govan women when they were gathering food for Spain and things like that, because I had a very good friend who used to tell me about when she was young, a young teenager in Govan. She was in the Young Communist League, and they were always collecting food for Spain,
What was interesting in the Aid for Spain campaigns was the role in which women played, working class women in particular. Working class women for the first time were at the forefront of a movement. Whereas the suffragette movement had been this middle class thing, here was a real movement of working class women who had been so kept out of the stuffy world of the trade union hall and the membership committee. They really did drive this. They drove it by organising a number of different events. Here in Glasgow you had Spanish fiestas and fairs. Every town and village in Scotland was encouraged to make a mile of pennies for Spain. There was a broad wave of activities. A food convoy was left here from Broomielaw to take thousands of tons of food across to Spain. A Basque refugee children's home was opened in Montrose.
Govan was in a ferment of social bloody upheaval because there was massive unemployment. I mean, the bottom fell out of things in 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. I don't know if you remember. There was massive unemployment. I think there were 3 million unemployed in the UK. And that in itself pushed to the surface and got people asking why.
I think it was the deep-seated working class knowledge and what they learned from their parents and grandparents, and they were taught that only they could do something for themselves, and they always did it. And not only for themselves, but for the people of Spain, anybody who they felt needed to be helped. If they were working class, they did it.
Apparently there were refugees in Govan during that time. Do you have any information in your research about this?
And that's a really fascinating thing that I'd not heard before, so it's brilliant to learn that. I can tell you more about the wider movement to bring in refugees. This was something that came up really around the bombing of Guernica, famously in Picasso's painting of the same name. There was a drive to bring across children from the Basque country in particular. I don't know if the local ones were Basque, but to bring them across before further slaughter of that area. Hitler seems to have been absolutely intent on really flattening that particular area, the Basque country in the north of Spain. So across Britain, thousands of Basque children arrived in Southampton and were held in or lived in a range of camps, outdoor camps, before being rehoused across England. However, there's only one refugee home in Scotland, and that was in Montrose, as a result of Dundee's involvement in the Spanish Civil War, which was particularly big. Twice as many volunteers went from Dundee as Edinburgh, for instance. Yet, again, the normal people of Scotland, as it seems, and Govan now, were happy to take these kids in, not bothered about what the government was telling them, and were happy to pioneer this bringing in of refugees. Very unheralded story, I think, a very humanitarian story. In the days before mass mobilisation of internet appeals, that such an aid movement could grow like that is quite incredible.
The Govan family that I knew who had a Spanish child, a boy, the lad's name I knew was Dan Kelly. And Dan Kelly was a very active member of the trade union and trades council movement. The boy lived with them until he was a young man, and then he went back to Spain. At that time, I think it was common to be called up for the Spanish army, and he, I think, so that he wouldn't lose his Spanish nationality, as it were, because he didn't want to give up his Spanish nationality. I'm presuming this to some extent, that he went back to Spain. I don't know. I never heard any more about him, but he didn't stay in Govan any longer.
My name's Thomas Cleary. I'm 38 and I've lived in Govan all my life. I didn't know a thing about the Spanish Civil War before joining this group at the portal. I'm a support worker and I take care of Joe Maitland.
Govan's my hometown, you know. I lived all my life in Govan. I had 3 houses in dresses in Govan. I like Govan.
We had come to Bellahouston Park in Govan to look for the plaque on the Peace Cairn. The cairn had been part of the Peace Pavilion at the 1938 Empire Exhibition. We had heard there was a mention on it to the Basque refugee children who had stayed in Govan. Various organisations and groups had donated stones for the cairn in support of world peace.
Every branch of GPCB. This one's paid by a Spanish refugee. It's a Spanish refugee. It says in Spanish, Macue Rock Ohe. Don't know what it means. Paid by Spanish refugee. Children. August, I think it says. 1938. August 1938, I think it is.
Brilliant, that's the one we were looking for. Where is it?
This one.
Proof of the Basque refugee children and more Govan connections with the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, well, they just told me about that.
Though we had found out a lot about Govan and Glasgow's involvement with the Aid for Spain campaign and in sending men and women to fight against fascism, we still didn't have any direct evidence of how the banners were used and who made them and why. We invited Professor John Foster, a social historian, to give his opinion on the banners. What do you think, Mr. Foster, having seen the photographs of 30 years ago or maybe 70 years ago banners?
Yes. Well, they're striking banners, and artistically they're very, very fine banners. Now, I originally, when I thought about these, having looked at them, I think might have revised my opinion. I thought these were possibly banners that were carried on a May Day march in 1938. Because in that year, I think it was that year, an attempt was made to transform the May Day into a presentation of all the progressive trends in Scottish history, all the battles for freedom and liberty and against authoritarianism and injustice. And I think it's the 38 May Day. You see a succession of pageant floats going by, William Wallace, and then going through the Covenanters, and then up to Muir and 1820 and on through the Chartists. But these almost seem too big for that purpose. So I suspect it may have been associated with that. Maybe they were actually at the May Day rally at the end, where they could have been set up as tableau or something like that. But it seems very much part of that period, that attempt to recreate that understanding of Scotland's history as a fight against oppression. And I would suspect that if there was that pageant in 1938 that was led by the Popular Front elements of the IOP, the Communist Party and the SNP, the Govan Socialist Party, Scottish Socialist Party, would have been part of that. So that's my attempt to position those banners in history. They may not have been carried on the May Day, they may have been part of some kind of celebration at the end of it, but I think that is where they go. And of course they fit into the struggle against Spain and linking 1820 to the struggle in Spain to defend democracy.
We were nearing the end of our time on this project. Though we had found archive footage of the May Day rally in 1938, we hadn't seen footage of the historical pageant which John Foster described. We decided it was definitely worth another look in the archives. I went to the Scottish Film Archive to see a short film from 1938 called Challenge to Fascism. Maybe this would hold the key to the mystery of the banners.
Hi, I'm Angela Ross. I'm the Development Officer with Plantation Productions. I'm just in helping out with the workshops, but overall I think the project has been fantastic. It just started off with a wee story, it grew feet and legs and totally ran, and I think it's really exciting that this film has been made.
I don't know what the original master's like, but this is just a copy, and it's a copy of a copy. if you see.
That's a parade there.
Yeah. Just a huge big parade. And marching.
The George Square.
As I say, it's been copied and copied, do you know what I mean? They've not got the... Much use.
The George Square. Scotland Free, isn't it? Was that the 1820 then, no?
Was it Scotland Free or dinner?
Get out, I've been too fast.
Oh look, yes. It is running fast. It should be about 18 frames a second, but we've only got one steam deck that runs at 18 frames a second.
That's
Oh,
it.
yes.
See it? So I was right. It was on a cart.
Fantastic.
That was why. That's amazing. So it was on a cart.
Just a flash.
Well, we've been trying for the past 3 months to try, well, the past 30 years trying to find about this banner. That is it there. That's it there. That's one of the banners. That's the banner that's on on the information that was found. So now we know. I couldn't believe it. I just seen it get by there. You know, and I'm going like, that's it. That other banner will probably the other side of that transport. Whether I take it to a horse and cart or.
Well, are we happy?
Eureka! What am I doing here? Why am I doing here? Because the television is rubbish.